stupid dog. You made me look like a...
For you who are younger maybe, right? Maybe you don't know this cartoon. And to explain it really quickly here, it's basically a cartoon. It features a purple dog with yellowish teeth who lives in an isolated place literally called nowhere, together with an elderly couple named Muriel and Eustace. And even though the place is really isolated, they get visits from all sorts of bizarre beings. And here we'll talk about some of them. The Queen of the Black Puddle is basically a mermaid in Courage's universe. Like most mermaids, or even succubi, she ends up seducing men. She wears a black dress and has purplish hair. And when she betrays the men, she kills them afterwards. Or rather, she tries to devour them. In the Queen's case, taking them to her palace, which is down under the water. And when she wants a prey, she's determined enough to get it no matter what. A detail is that she can leave her world through any liquid, whether it's tea, coffee, tears, water, anything. In the first episode where she appears, which is even named after her, everything starts with Courage getting some affection from Muriel, until Eustace, being the jerk he is, scares him. Courage leaves the house and then he sees a puddle bubbling there. Courage goes over and sees his reflection turning into the Queen's face. And as always, he tries to warn his owners about what he saw, but no one cares about him. In fact, Muriel even says that Courage must be crazy and probably just saw a fish there.
Oh, Courage, it must have been a fish. There's no need to worry, but...
But Courage is still worried, until suddenly the Queen comes out of Eustace's tea, which is actually a pretty weird scene. And starts calling for him. Eustace acts kind of silly, and then Muriel asks him to go fix the leak in the kitchen. Eustace goes reluctantly, but he goes, and then the Queen appears to him again, but this time in a drop of water. And Eustace gets so silly, really silly, that he even sits inside the bucket. Muriel, thinking he's acting really strange, tells him to take a bath, so they can just end the day already. But there in the bathtub, the Queen appears again and makes Eustace, almost literally, go down the drain.
Eustace, oh my God, I'm getting worried about you, Eustace.
Then everyone goes to sleep, and a very creepy scene happens where the Queen comes out of the puddle outside and enters their house during the night. And entering There, she picks up Eustacio and takes him to the puddle. The next morning, Muriel wakes up and thinks that Eustacio had left and everything, and she starts to cry. And then Courage decides to go after Eustacio to rescue him, and he ends up finding the Queen's castle. Then, he sees her transforming into a bizarre monster, but using a fishing rod, he manages to grab Eustacio and escape from there. And in the end, another queen even appears, but this time for Courage himself. I have videos on Mythology, Adventure Time, and Regular Show on this channel. You can also find them in the card and description. If you're interested in books or more on mythologies, check the pinned link in the comments. The Mattress Demon episode is simply the Courage episode that talks about demonic possession. Pretty chill, right? And it all starts with Muriel complaining about the old mattress she was sleeping on. A mattress that even had a big spring sticking out of it, and they were still sleeping on it. But anyway.
Eustace, I want a new mattress, and that's final.
The next morning, Eustace searches for a mattress in the newspaper and finds a cheap one. Muriel calls the mattress number, and the place says they were even expecting her call. The mattress is then carried in a very strange way and delivered in an even stranger way. Courage tries again to warn them that he saw something strange there, but he's ignored again, and Muriel goes to take a nap, and when Courage goes to check on her again, he sees that she's being possessed by a weird green demon. In her possessed form, Muriel even looks a bit like Medusa with her hair. Well, then Courage asks Eustace for help, but Eustace is kind of a jerk to him again. But then Courage picks him up and carries him to the room to see Muriel. And there we have a scene kind of like The Exorcist, where Muriel turns her neck.
So do you want to come stay with me?
Courage again. He goes to see how Muriel is doing, and he has a brief conversation with the demon there, and it's even revealed at that moment that it's not just one demon possessing Muriel, but several.
She's here with us, Courage. Help me. Oops, it came out.
I know this has a quick D2 war kind of random, but Courage ends up losing. With the defeat, he turns to someone we always consult when facing a problem. In this case, the internet.
Exorcist, exactly an exorcist. Instructions for a basic exorcism, oh my.
And he prints out an exorcism from the internet, and he gives it to Eustacio so he can try to get the demon out of his wife. But he's simply humiliated, even getting licked in the face and vomited on. Also, it was a dite.
I complain.
What is this? But then Courage himself ends up performing the exorcism, and the demons go into Eustace, who gets whacked by Muriel, gets trapped in the mattress, and then is returned to the store. This one isn't a creature or anything too out of the ordinary, but he's a really, really weird guy. He's basically a psychopath, so it's worth mentioning here. As he himself says, Fred is very cruel.
Is about my dear Aunt Muriel and how I have been cruel.
Actually, every episode with him is really weird too. Fred is Muriel's nephew, who appears for the first time in an episode called Weird Fred, or Freaky Fred in English. And although apparently Muriel likes him a lot, Eustace doesn't feel the same way. Since he calls him a freak or something like that several times, saying that the freak is a barber, a weird barber.
The guy is a barber, a crazy barber with his own crazy barber shop.
And Courage also, of course, doesn't like him. In fact, he's very afraid of Fred. Fred realized that his compulsion to be cruel happened for the first time. When he got a hamster as a pet, he cut off all the fur from the little animal. Later, he ended up falling in love with a girl named Barbara, who had an untamed mane. They had a pretty normal relationship until one night he ended up shaving her head, which made her break up with him. After that, he promised himself that he would control this compulsion, and he did.
I was never cruel again. Well, never would be an exaggeration.
But with the arrival of a man with a long beard at his barber shop, it all came back.
I immediately thought, why not? So was I really cruel?
Fred then ended up being admitted to a mental institution for crazy barbers. During the holidays, he ended up visiting his aunt and her husband, Muriel and Eustace. And during that time, he became really obsessed with Courage and even ended up getting stuck in the bathroom with him. Taking advantage of that, he started cutting Courage's fur little by little until there was practically nothing left.
The city of Brazil.
Only his little tail. And when he left, being taken away by the police, he left a note there for Courage, written with love, Fred. And even as he was being taken away by the police, he kept looking at Courage's farm with a very creepy smile, while saying goodbye in his thoughts and farewell.
Courage! What's wrong with having been a little cruel?
Mole? A werewolf is a type of predator from nowhere, and just like a werewolf, it passes the curse on when it bites someone. They are very violent and are always looking to feed, either on rabbits or humans, and always in a horrible way. They grab, bite their victim, and shake them. They have characteristics of being hairy and extremely aggressive, with a completely inhuman nature. And the only known cure for someone who ends up becoming a weremole would be to give that person a bit of the fur from the mole that infected them. But that only works with humans and rabbits. We don't know about the rest. When Courage was bitten by the mole, he didn't turn into one because he was already a dog. So, the weremole curse doesn't work on Courage, although he could still be beaten up or even killed by one of them. In the episode where she appears for the first time, one of those moles bites Muriel, who ends up transforming and causing trouble. With Courage and Eustace, the situation is only resolved when Courage once again asks the internet for help, which gives him the cure. King Ramses definitely has one of the scariest episodes of Courage, especially because of the scene you're about to see here. And he ends up casting some curses on Courage's house because Eustace took a stone that belonged to him, which was stolen from his personal tomb.
Judging by the markings and the obvious age of the relic, I would say this is Middle Stone Age.
Eustace realized that the tablet was worth a fortune, so he refused to give it back. Even though he's extremely tormented by the pharaoh's ghostly curse, King Ramses is expensive, isn't he? The pharaoh's ghost, whose tomb ended up being disturbed by two thieves, even ends up kind of scaring both of them right there in his tomb. But they ended up hiding the stone in the water pump at Courage's house. And realizing this, he ends up sending a swarm of locusts to devour everyone there. But when Courage ends up finding the tablet, Eustace at first doesn't really care. He seems kind of uninterested, but he immediately grabs the stone when he realizes it's worth about $1 million. It's the stone.
The $1 million stone stolen from King Ramses' tomb. I'm rich.
The researcher visits their house to get the stone, but Eustacio refuses and slams the door in the researcher's face. That same night, Eustacio becomes obsessed with the money and starts talking to himself about what he'll buy with his money. But then they start hearing very loud noises outside the house, and when they go to see what's happening, Eustacio ends up opening the door, and there is the spirit of King Ramses paying a visit to the farm and asking for the stone back. And then the scene happens, which is quite scary.
Return the stone, or you will suffer my curse.
And even after being warned that he would end up suffering a curse if he didn't return the stone, Eustacio still refuses, thinking that King Ramses was actually a researcher in disguise, just trying to get the relic back.
He thought the professor was just pretending. Who is he fooling? You can see a zipper on that cheap costume.
King Ramses casts a curse on the water, one of 3 listed on the stone, flooding the house. Courage then opens a large drain in the basement. Again, the pharaoh asks for the stone. Eustace refuses. And then comes the next curse, which is a loud, extremely annoying music that comes from a phonograph, playing a song about King Ramses, calling him the man from Gazet. Courage ends up discovering where the sound is coming from and destroys everything using a stick. There, insisting once again, King Ramses appears again and asks for the stone back. But in the middle of the third curse, Eustace ends up kind of bribing Ramses.
All right, but I won't accept less than $1 million.
Trying to make a deal there, but he kind of gives up. When they're about to be swallowed by locusts, Courage throws the stone out the window. But then Eustace changes his mind again and jumps to grab my stone.
There are 3 plagues. He's out of ammo.
And Eustace kind of starts provoking. There, King Ramses again raises his arms and simply calls the 3rd plague again, the swarm of locusts that go straight for Eustace. And then when the stone is finally returned to King Ramses, a researcher appears reporting everything on television, and you can see an image that would represent Eustace screaming there, kind of like his own hieroglyph. The spirit, as you can see there, is extremely bizarre, just its appearance alone. He basically got upset with Eustace and Muriel because they didn't respect his land and never made an offering on the night of the full moon, even with Eustace saying that the land is incapable of bearing fruit. Because of that, he casts a spell on the farm, causing all sorts of strange happenings, and then demands that they leave the house. After Eustace and Muriel stay there, the spirit gives them 10 minutes to grow some kind of plant. When Eustace refuses, Muriel and the spirit argue with him, calling him stubborn and not a farmer. After about 10 minutes, the spirit raises the temperature, which makes everything melt. Then, Courage manages to grow a plant using Eustace's sweat, and when the plant grows, the spirit lowers the temperature. Everything goes back to normal, and he leaves, saying some kind of enigmatic message about how they have grown more than before. Fantastic. Bye.
You made it grow.
More than a big sum.
A happy little ball.
Goose God is basically an anthropomorphic goose who is pretty muscular and is a god. Most likely he was inspired by the gods, as you will see in the videos there, during the episode called The Gods Can Be Geese. This god ends up feeling very lonely and falls in love with Muriel. And he visits her many times and gives her lots of gifts, flowers, and many other things. Courage tries, of course, to stop him from getting anything. And Eustace pays much more attention to his truck than to what's happening there. After Muriel ends up rejecting him, she does it kindly, saying that she had a very happy marriage, which, well, at least for me as I watched, didn't seem that happy, but for her, apparently it was happy. But Goose refuses to take no for an answer and decides to keep trying. When he starts pulling her up to the skies, Courage tries one last time to get Eustace's help by honking the truck's horn. And this ends up pleasing the Goose God, who falls in love with him and takes the truck to his home in the clouds. My truck. Benton Tarantella, who is nothing more, nothing less than a serial killer in the Courage universe, as incredible as it may seem, huh?
I am Benton Tarantella.
In the first episode where he appears, he introduces himself to Eustace and Muriel as the great independent director Benton Tarantella.
The famous independent film director.
And right away you can tell he's a zombie, right? But Muriel and Eustace don't notice, do they? Then Benton says he wants to use the farm area to shoot his new movie, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Return of the Zombies on the Farm. Something like that.
And I want to make my movie here on your farm.
At first, Eustacio doesn't want to, but then Benton says he's going to pay him a lot of money, so he accepts without any problems. Very well, we're interested. And already in this scene, his disguise starts to slip and everything. Courage notices, tries to warn Muriel, but Benton says she would be a star in his movie. She doesn't pay much attention to Courage, as always happens, right? Well, then Benton goes to film down in the basement with Muriel and Eustace, who keeps wanting to be in the movie and asking if he'll get paid more because of it. Meanwhile, Courage goes to his computer and asks, "Who is Benton Tarantella?" And then, I'm sorry.
No record of Benton Tarantella in the independent film databases, nor in any movie or PC lists.
It says it has never heard of any director with that name. However, there is a Benton Tarantella who was a serial killer and pretended to be a director to approach his victims. And he had a partner named Volkheim. The two ended up in prison. Volkheim got out, but Tarantella stayed there and died. And in this part, there's a really good scene where Courage asks, right? What happened to Volkheim? Whoa.
Oh, guys, where's the other guy, Volkheim?
He's dead.
Courage celebrates by shouting, it's just that then the PC says that Volkheim was buried exactly on the farm he's at. He was buried in the cemetery. Great.
Where this house was built.
That's it.
That's not good.
Then Courage's expression changes quickly. Man, this scene is really good, man. Courage is really good, right, man? Damn, it's the brown bed, so Courage is going to try to warn Muriel. But then Benton Tarantella again talks about her being a star. She doesn't pay attention, and Benton locks Courage in a chest. He then asks Eustace to film the scene of him resurrecting his partner. There on the farm, the projects join forces. Volkheim comes back. But at the moment when both Benton and Volkheim are about to devour Muriel, Courage manages to get the script from inside the chest. Then, don't ask me how, he rewrites the whole script, and then Eustace, since he didn't know what to do, Benton tells him to read the script, and he reads the script, all modified by Courage, who tells him to free Muriel and for the two of them to return to the tomb. Volkheim comes back complaining about Benton, and the two end up being buried by Courage.
I can't believe it. You're a terrible screenwriter.
And now let's go to Senior Mal, which is also related to Benton Tarantella, who comes back in the third season when Eustace, Muriel, and Courage are leaving the movie theater.
The boy is annoying. I thought it was wonderful.
By the way, they were watching 101 Dalmatians, or 1001 Dalmatians, if I'm not mistaken. They end up bumping into Benton Tarantella, and interestingly, they don't recognize him at first. And Benton, so he invites them to take part in a television show he's creating called Nervous and Mean People. And since he promises a lot of money and recognition, both Muriel and Eustace end up accepting. And there, Benton starts filming them doing mean things and all that.
But there's more. Hey, the stupid dog is now the stupid hot dog.
Muriel gets excited, Eustacio too, and back at the farm, Benton starts recording. They're up to mischief, and they end up getting carried away. Benton asks for a break and heads to the kitchen, with Courage following. He overhears Benton telling Lazo that the real star will come out of the chamber, and when he goes back to record Muriel and Eustacio, he explains that that camera was special, that it records the true essence of a person. And there, from the television, Senior Mal comes out, who is basically the personification of his own evil. And Eustacio...
Say hello, our star, Senior Mal, the living personification of all the evil of the farmer.
And Senior Mal becomes the real star of the show. He starts cursing at Muriel, mistreating Courage, and even Eustacio. Muriel and Courage end up really messed up in the head because of this. But Eustacio doesn't, because he was making a lot of money.
Sorry, Senior Tarantella, but I would like to retire from showbiz.
To fix things, Courage pretends he'll throw Muriel into quicksand he placed in the room. And don't ask me how. And what about Benton? Seeing that Courage would be much more evil than Senior Mal himself, he says that Courage would be the new star of the show. Senior Mal leaves along with Eustace, who wanted to follow him to make more money. And then Courage kicks the chair Benton is sitting on, and he falls into the quicksand. What?
What is this?
And at the end of the episode, we end up seeing Senior Mal and Eustace doing a new show. And in the end, Senior Mal says he's going to take a lot of money from Eustace, and the episode ends with Eustace crying there. Now let's talk about Lequaque, who is basically a duck, who is a thief. At least I think he's a duck, right? You can't be sure, but by the name Lequaque, I believe he's a duck. He appears in an episode where Muriel loses her memory after something hits her head. Eustace is working on the roof, and she asks him to stop so he won't wake the neighborhood, even though they have no neighbors. The thing falls on her head and she gets amnesia. Since she ends up forgetting who Courage was, Eustace takes advantage and kicks him out of the house and says that she would actually be a wife. Slave, those are his words, not mine.
My slave wife. Your job is to clean, cook, do the shopping, wash clothes, and everything else I can think of.
Courage then asks his computer for help, which sends a message asking for an amnesia specialist. And that message ends up being received.
At Lequaque, an amnesia specialist was requested.
And he ends up seeing that as a good opportunity to steal the farm. So he gets there at Cauteo Eustacio and locks him up in a little room, a wardrobe, something like that, while he tries to torture Muriel and make her talk. Where are the jewels, the deed to the house, and those things?
Where are the family jewels?
Whenever Courage tries to help by entering the house, Lequaque chases him with a big sledgehammer and throws him out. Once Lequaque is there with the stinky cheese trying to get Muriel to reveal where the house deed is. Then Courage shows up, and when Lequaque goes after him, Courage quickly shuts the door, and Lequaque bumps into it. And when he opens it again, there's a giant rat who punches Lequaque, eats the cheese, and gets some money right there. From Courage, meaning Courage had hired that rat exactly for that. Thank you, Mr. Ratto. By the episode's end, Courage calls the police from nowhere, but they take a little while, which is just enough time for Lequaque to almost pull Courage into a vacuum cleaner, which ends up exploding. Then the police show up and arrest Lequaque.
Ah, we were looking for you.
But that's more towards the end of the episode. He shows up there after flipping the police van, puts on the police uniform, and tells us that we haven't seen Lequaque for the last time.
Wait, you guys still haven't gotten rid of Lequaque?
Katz, who I thought was Katz, but in the dubbing they say Katz. He's the owner of a hotel, a really bizarre hotel. Ali, who appears in the first episode of Courage's Family, ends up in this hotel on the last day of vacation. What they're on vacation from, exactly, I don't know.
This is a mediocre place for us to end our mediocre vacation. Well,
Courage ends up not being accepted at the motel there because they don't allow dogs. so he gets stuck outside. While Eustace goes to sleep, he spends the rest of the episode sleeping. Muriel goes to take a bath. Well, there, in the middle of the night, Katz ends up leaving a mysterious box right in front of where Courage was. And when he opens it, a very bizarre spider comes out and chases after Courage. Then, Courage tries everything to remove the collar, a chainsaw, chemicals, even a flamethrower. In the end, he frees himself using only his teeth. Then, it's revealed to us that Katz has something with spiders. He loves spiders and even raises some. And Muriel, Eustace, and Courage would end up being their food. That night...
Goodbye, love. The dirty afternoon has already arrived.
And Courage ends up going inside the motel. He quickly tries to help Muriel, who is being attacked in the bathtub by one of the spiders, which takes quite a while to attack Muriel. And when it attacks, it doesn't even succeed. It ends up going down the drain. Meanwhile, Eustace is sleeping very heavily, and he doesn't even wake up when Katz ends up putting him in one of the spider webs there, and he ends up being saved by Courage. And at the moment when Courage is there, taking Eustace out of the spider's bizarre room, Courage throws Eustace on top of Katz and ends up escaping from him. But Katz ends up cornering Courage against a kind of wall there, but when you think Katz is going to, I don't know, try to kill Courage, they start playing ball. They're tossing a little ball against the wall. And, at the end of the game, Katz grabs one of his spiders and tries to put it on Courage, when he ends up getting hit with a racket by Muriel herself. So Muriel, Eustace, and Courage leave. So Muriel, Courage, and Eustace, who is still sleeping and still inside the spider's cocoon, leave the place.
What a beautiful blanket Grandpa got.
Ghidorah, who would be a villain from Godzilla, surprisingly appears in Courage the Cowardly Dog. And there's an episode where Muriel ends up being invited to something, a presentation.
I won the zither contest. I'm going to play my zither live on the radio.
They go to New York and end up being greeted by a giant cockroach whose name I forgot now, but he repeated it 300 times. I'll even ask the editor to put it up for you guys. By the way, my name is... Well, so the cockroach takes Eustace, Muriel, and Courage to a rehearsal room, which is really bizarre. There are a lot of skeletons there. There's a weird door, and there's a strange creature there too. And he asks Courage to go get a delivery for him. And if he doesn't do it, Muriel will be done for. Bring this package to me before the curtain opens, or it will be the end.
So,
Courage arrives at a strange place, a small building. As he goes up the stairs, he opens several doors. The first one he opens, he ends up seeing Ghidorah. In the second door, he sees a shark, which really scared me because I'm afraid of the deep sea. And in the third door, he sees a little girl there playing the violin. He thinks it's cute, but then the girl turns to him and makes a really weird face. And even in this scene, I think the animation is made of clay, which makes it even weirder. The Vandals of the Windmill. It's a really cool episode about Courage with the Coward, for me, because it talks about a local legend from the farm itself, basically. The episode starts with having some problems with the electricity on the farm, and because of that, Eustace has to fix the windmill. But after all the hours he spent working on it, it would be fixed. Every time Eustace is there working and the windmill stops spinning, Courage notices that there's something coming from the horizon. And when Courage is left alone there, holding the wrench so the windmill wouldn't stop spinning, he ends up falling and the windmill stops. And with that, the Vandals appear, who are basically zombie soldiers, zombie knights who want to attack the farm. And then when Eustace comes back, he goes up to fix the windmill by himself, and the windmill blades start kicking up dust, or something that was covering up some magical symbols. Courage goes up there and takes a picture of those symbols and sends it to his computer, and it tells him a story about that windmill. According to the computer, about 200 years ago, the first owner of the farm ended up building that windmill so he wouldn't rely on a hydraulic system run by Vandals who controlled the area's energy. When the water ran out, The Vandals began to hate the farmer and wanted to destroy him. To keep them away, the farmer put some magical symbols on the windmill, and according to the legend, when the windmill stopped spinning, the Vandals would come back from the dead and attack whoever owned it at the time. Eustace, Muriel, and Courage. Lucky for us, that's just a story. Well, when Courage goes back to the windmill where Eustace and Muriel are, the windmill stops spinning, and then the Vandals show up and manage to rip off Eustace and Muriel's heads. Amazingly, neither dies. Their heads keep talking and their bodies keep moving. After they get their heads back for a moment, they manage to rebuild the windmill, and with that, the Vandals go away. Now let's move on to the episode about the big toe. And I would advise you, if you're watching this video while having lunch, dinner, or even a snack, to stop, because this episode is pretty disgusting. Well, it starts with Eustacio there at night, having an itch on his foot. So when Muriel wakes up, she realizes he has a fungus there, a really bad fungus, because it makes Eustacio's foot turn purple with some pus-filled bumps. Anyway, then Muriel says she has some home remedies for that, like, for example, rubbing cactus on the foot, putting the foot in a bucket of lobsters, and other weird things. But when she realizes it doesn't work, she tells Eustacio to go to the doctor, but he doesn't want to go. He says he just needs to rest a bit, that everything will be fine. He naps, and when he wakes up, his foot is already overtaking his body. So it absorbs Eustacio and turns into a gangster foot. That's right, a gangster foot. Called Big Toe, he ends up forcing Courage to drive the truck so they can rob a bank and also try to rob a train. But everything ends up going wrong. So, while Big Toe is there in the house trying to plan another heist, Courage manages to go to his computer and ask for help. And the computer asks for a sample of the fungus from Eustace's foot. And then Courage, kind of using a fishing rod, grabs a ball of pus and puts it in the computer. And then the computer says that what he could do is kind of spit on the foot because the cure would be dog saliva. And then Courage doesn't spit. No, he licks the whole foot, and then Eustace goes back to normal. And there, at the end of the episode, the fungus ends up taking over Courage's tongue. Well, if you watch this video until now, don't forget to leave a like, to subscribe to Hypar's channel too, which is very important, and leave a comment below. Maybe a series, a cartoon, anything else you want me to bring a list of creatures about. All right, thanks. See you. Bye.